Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Appreciate you joining me here for another week. Before I get into today's topic, please make sure that you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. The podcast is up on Apple, Spotify, Google, all the great podcast platforms. So jump on there, make sure you're subscribed. Give us a like if you're able to on that platform and share it around with anybody who you think might get some value out of what it is I am doing here. You can also jump on and follow us on the socials at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram and The Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook. You'll be able to find the video version of this podcast on YouTube and the Facebook page, and it will generally be published every Wednesday, and the audio episodes go up on the audio platforms every Saturday. So in order to stay up to date and get the notifications when a new episode drops, make sure you're subscribed. So for this week, I'm going to talk about a saying that I think it's a pretty common saying. It might only be a common saying in my house and in some of the circles that I run in, and it's don't be sorry, be better. And it sounds like it's a very harsh thing to say to somebody, but it's something I've actually found myself saying quite a lot to my kids of late, because one thing, the older that my kids get, the more I realize that sorry as a word can be fairly useless most times, and it's even for little things. One of them does something to the other which is pretty nonchalant, and we make them say sorry to each other, but then the habit doesn't really change. It just kind of keeps going. And I actually heard this saying when I was away coaching on one of the Australian teams at one of our World Cup campaigns, and one of the American coaches, who's a good friend of mine now, actually said to one of the players when they did something they were not doing what they were supposed to within the scheme, and they turned around and apologized. They said sorry, and he said, "Don't be sorry, be better." And it's kind of something since I've heard that where it got a little bit of a pop out of, a little bit of a laugh out of the people that were there, thinking that that's a kind of funny saying. But now as a parent, and now just as a human being, it kind of holds a little bit more meaning to me. And obviously, probably the underlying tone of it is like actions speak louder than words. And saying sorry, but not actually changing anything or changing your behaviors after you say sorry doesn't really mean that you're sorry, or doesn't really mean that you've learnt from the interaction or the experience. And this is one of the things that I've been noticing with the kids, right? And one of the things that I'm talking to, I kind of talk to our 8-year-old about. 4-year-old's probably doesn't quite comprehend it. The 8-year-old's starting to get to a point where she comprehends it a little bit more. And it's like, there's no point in saying sorry if we're not learning from the thing that we're sorry for. So if we actually do something and we're genuinely sorry for what we've done, because maybe we've done wrong by somebody, we've hurt somebody, or whatever the case might be, then what we want to do next time we get caught in that situation, we want to try and make sure that we make the appropriate changes so that we don't keep redoing the same mistake over and over and over again. Because if that's the case, there's no point in actually verbalizing the fact that we're sorry, because we're not actually taking the action to change our behavior at the back end of it. And that's on a deeper level. When I say that, or when I hear this, it's all about learning. It's all about growing. If we are sorry for something, for an action that we've taken, for something that we've said, for something that we've done, then I think there has to be some form of concerted effort to correct that next time it happens. So we're not just being sorry about it, we're actually trying to get better, and we're trying to learn from that experience. And that's what that saying for me means. And, there's so many cliches that you could tie into that particular saying. If nothing changes, nothing changes. The whole point of saying it and harping on about it for me as a parent is really just to be mindful of things that we are doing when we're doing it. And especially if it's something that is detrimental to us or detrimental to those around us, we need to be mindful so that when it comes up again, we can actually start to correct that and stop having to say sorry. And I think in general, we probably all say sorry far too much. We probably don't need to apologize for 75% of the things that we apologize to or for. But the fact of the matter is, if we do apologize for something, but then we don't, and we are truly sorry about what we're apologizing for, but then we don't make the effort to actually change that the next time it comes up, then are we really sorry for what we've just done? My leaning and my inkling is that we're probably not, because if we were truly sorry, if we did truly feel bad, or we did truly have a moment where, hey, I probably shouldn't have done that, the next time it comes up, we want to try and learn from it. And there's probably an argument to be made about like deeply embedded behaviors that have been learnt over time and relearning those things. But at the end of the day, if it is really important to you to change, and you are truly in a position where you're regretful for taking that action or doing that thing, then we need to put ourselves in a position where next time it happens, we're actually mindfully unable to change that particular thing that was done. Now, there's a whole thing that could go into the back end of this, right? Like, but the big thing is, I've spoken to it from like teaching the kids how to basically not say sorry, say sorry when they mean it, because there should be things that you should say sorry for, right? There's going to be things that we're going to do, mistakes we're going to make, where we should really apologize, but being mindful of the times that we do that, and not just saying it all the time for the sake of saying it, because hey, maybe we've been caught out on something that we shouldn't have done, and do we? And this is a whole other conversation, kind of digressing from the point of the podcast. But then there's also the element where it's like, what are you sorry for? You're sorry because you got caught, or are you sorry because you actually hurt somebody in the action? But back to the point of the podcast, like from the point of view of the kids, then we also have to turn around, as with everything with our children, and look at ourselves. Like, what's the example that we're setting? Are we going around and are we saying sorry all the time? And are we maybe not explaining why we're saying sorry for that particular instance? And then on top of that, if we're saying sorry for something, are we consistently then going and making that same behavior and having to apologize for it, and not actually learning from the mistakes or learning from those interactions that we're saying sorry for? Because there has to be that concerted effort to actually make a change if we are truly sorry for it. Like, don't be sorry, be better. And that whole saying really comes down to trying to unlearn a behavior that maybe gets embedded in you, but you have to go through a process of being able to learn. Like, so I've had this explained to me before, and a lot of people may or may not know, but there are essentially 4 stages of learning, right? And we start off in the stage of unconscious incompetence. So what that means is basically we don't know what we don't know. So we do a negative behavior from the point of view of saying sorry for something, and it's not until it upsets somebody or somebody points that out to us that we don't, like, may not know that it's harmful to other people until we get some level of feedback. So it may not even be verbal feedback, it may be body cues or anything like that, but we've potentially done that behavior for quite a while, and we're unconsciously incompetent about whether we're doing it. And most kids, for most of the stuff that they do, are in this stage of learning. Like, they'll do something and they're not aware that they're doing it, or they're not aware of the consequences of it. And as a parent, a lot of the time, it's actually our job to try and bring them up through that stages of learning in a way where they can make their own mistakes and learn from it and evolve. But the first stage of learning is that unconscious incompetence. From there, once we've had this thing pointed out to us, we then move into conscious incompetence. So basically, we know that we are doing something and that we're not good at correcting it, or we know that we suck at doing something. And you can apply this to sports as well too, right? Like, when you haven't played a sport, you don't know what you don't know, and you haven't been exposed to that sport. You just don't know what you don't know. Once you get exposed to it, you see it, and then you try and do it. you consciously know that you suck at whatever this thing is. And it's the same thing from the point of view of a habit, right? We may get feedback from somebody where it's like, oh, I've had to apologize for that. So now we're conscious about that behavior that we've done. And then from there, what we want to try and do whenever we're learning a new skill or a new behavior is we want to move into the next stage, so the third stage, which is conscious competence. And what that means is we are getting better at whatever it is that we're doing. If we're learning a new skill, we have a good level of competence around it, but we have to think about everything that we do. We have to start to think about the words that we're saying. We have to start to think about the steps that we take if we're learning a physical skill, where to put our feet, where to put our hands, hand-eye coordination, all this stuff. But we have to think about every little movement that we're doing. And then the ultimate goal when you're trying to learn any new good or bad behavior is unconscious competence. And what that means is basically we're on autopilot. We are doing a particular habit, we are doing a particular activity, and we are able to do it without really even thinking. It's essentially reflex when we do it. So when we're talking about, I guess, being sorry for something, in order to correct that, we do need to move through these stages of learning. So it's not necessarily going to be something that, hey, I'm sorry for it now, and then the next time that I do it, it's going to be 100% corrected. Because depending on how long you've been doing that thing for, it may be actually a very long and involved process in order for you to correct it. But it all starts with that acknowledgement and moving from that first stage of unconscious incompetence into conscious incompetence, where we know what we don't know, but we're making a concerted effort to correct it. And this is the same thing. This is for us more so than it's for our kids, because as I've spoke about on the podcast, and as we all know, they're going to mirror our behaviors. So if they see us going around and they see us saying sorry for things, but they're not correcting the behavior, they're going to just assume that that's what we do. We just say sorry for everything, and it's going to kind of put a band-aid on it, but then we don't actually have to fix or change anything. And it doesn't matter how much we tell them not to do it. If we're not doing it ourselves, it's not going to stick, because they are going to learn through mirroring, through copying, and through seeing what we do. So in order to move through those stages, like, we need to be consciously aware. We need to understand that, hey, I'm doing this behavior, I'm taking this action to change. If I don't kind of lock in when I see it again, or when I identify it happening again, then it's going to keep reoccurring. So I need to understand that it's going to be a process to unlearn something and relearn a new thing. There are essentially those 4 stages that I need to move through from a learning point of view. And, you know, the goal, if you are stuck in this element where, you know, you're trying to be better, you're trying to move forward, the goal's potentially just to try and move to the next stage of learning, right? So if you do something, you've become aware that maybe it's a habit that needs to be changed. So the next time that it comes up, what we're trying to do is, right, I'm aware that it's happening, so I'm moving into that conscious incompetence, and I'm just not going to do it. I'm not even going to try and correct it. I'm just not going to do it. And then after, you know, that might take a couple of times to sink in. And then from there, we're going to move into, this is how I'm going to correct it. So I'm aware I'm doing it, I'm hitting it on the head, and I'm stopping doing it before it happens most times. So then it's like, I'm aware I'm doing it, and I'm going to start to try and correct it. And then from there, we can start to relearn that behavior and have it on autopilot. So when we're put in the same or a similar situation, we have a new reaction to that situation. Because at the end of the day, it's all very well and good for me to sit there and say to my kids, don't be sorry, be better. Or, hey, if you're not going to, there's no point in saying sorry for that if we're not going to change the behavior that's led to you saying sorry for it. But if I'm not going to do that myself, they're not going to do it. They're going to continue to repeat those patterns of behavior because they see me do it when I say sorry for something or I do something else. And sorry for me, we had one of Soph's kindergarten teachers, it was about 4 years ago now, say to us, hey, like, we don't say sorry. We just, or they didn't, it wasn't that we don't say sorry. It was just that it was more along, can't remember the exact words, but it was more along the lines of, hey, we're selective about when we say sorry, because it gets used all too often. And I kind of heard that, and it went a little bit over my head because at the age that she was at that point, I'm like, oh, like, it didn't really make a lot of sense. But now that they're older, and now that they're both older, and you see the interactions where, those of you with multiple kids will know, they fight a bit. Like, they're never going to get along. They're going to butt heads, especially when they start to become their own independent human beings. But it wasn't until kind of recently, the last couple of years, where I'm like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. And I see it happen there, and then flip the mirror onto me, I see it happening with me too. I see me do it all too often, saying sorry for things that I probably don't need to say sorry for, and on top of that, saying sorry for things that I'm just consistently repeating that pattern of behavior, and I'm not actually learning from that experience. I'm not growing, and I'm not moving myself forward. So that is it for this week. Don't be sorry, be better. Try and always move forward. There's something that you've got to say sorry for, that you've got to apologize for, there's probably something that you need to learn from that interaction and that experience. So let me know what you think. Let me know if that's something that you've come up against. If you've got kids that are a little bit older, I'm very interested in hearing your experiences, your opinions, whether sorry's a word in your household that you get them to use a lot. So let me know. Send me a message on the socials, Instagram, at The Unstoppable Dad, Facebook, The Unstoppable Dad Project. You can reach out there. If anybody does want to talk about any fitness coaching, obviously that's what I do. So saving the selling to the end of the episode, you can jump in my DMs on either of those social platforms, and we can have a bit more of a chat about that. So, hey, don't be sorry, be better, keep moving forward, try and learn from our mistakes, and have a great week. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.